I believe, August 3rd, 1992, in San Francisco with Izzy Young. And I want to start this off simply by asking Izzy to tell me in his words how he got into the folk music business.
That'll take more than an hour, but my name is Israel Goodman Young. I was born in Lower Manhattan and raised in the Bronx. Let's just give me background, 1928. Sure. And I was a normal Jewish kid from a ghetto. And I've written about it before, but I never, the only music I knew was the hit parade on Saturday night, basically. And so I knew all the songs. You'll never know just how much I love you, or You'll Never Smile Again. In those days, the hit parade lasted for years. It's not like today, where a song is on the top for 2 weeks and then forgotten. So I come from a tradition, quote, of listening to the radio, and then my family bought a wind-up Caesar Roebuck phonograph for $4. So I found myself buying Bing Crosby records, Frank Sinatra records, and all that kind of stuff. I was also very intelligent, went to rapid advanced RA classes, but I never figured out a career for myself. But I was supposed to be a doctor, a lawyer, all those things in descending order, Jewish panoply of life. And I got into this very difficult school, the high school of science.
Bronx High School of Science?
Which a lot of other people did, Tom Paley, Joe Jaffe, there's others. And so until the age of 16 or so, I never heard the word folk music in any form whatsoever. I had no concept of folk music. At the age of 16, 17, I was also the secretary of the Junior Astronomy Club at the Hayden Planetarium. And one night we were supposed to see stars with Clyde Fisher, the great man. And it was cloudy, so we couldn't go. So this girl said, let's go to one of those, I forgot the name of it, where Jewish people used to go, so it doesn't sound like a temple. I forgot. It had a name
synagogue?
at the time. What?
The synagogue?
No, it wasn't a synagogue, but it was where the rich kids went. It was Jewish, but it wasn't called Jewish. I forgot what it was. On the west side of Central Park. And this Dick Krause, who's probably written more books on square dance history in America, and he was at Columbia University teaching division, and he was running a square dance. So I said, me go to a square dance? Are you kidding? I'm not that kind of guy, as if you call me homosexual or something. So anyway, she convinced me to go, and I liked it. And actually the first dance I ever did in America was a Swedish quadrille dance, a toast we pledge to Augusta, brave and true, which I've talked about in Sweden. And 2 weeks later, somebody else invited me to a group called the American Square Dance Group, run by Margot Mayo. I went there, and they were making a film for the defense of war effort or whatever on folk culture in America. That happened about the third or the fourth week I was with the group.
Okay, back on.
Okay, so I come to this Margot Mayo, the American Square Dance Group, of which I knew nothing before, and evidently nothing after either. I come in, and they were busy working on a film for the war effort, for the USIS, or the equivalent of it at that time. A film, and I wasn't in on that. In other words, after 3 weeks or 4 weeks, I was hooked on the stuff.
Okay.
And I thought I was the best square dancer in America, and all that kind of thing. Not the best folk singer. Now, they had meetings every Friday night, and the membership was some very low amount. I forgot, $6 or $8 a year, or 25 cents a night. And Margot Mayo, who never had a career or job designation, as they call it today, lived off that. And she would teach in different schools, private schools and girls' schools, and make it was a hard-making living then. And her sister taught piano, which was traditional for independent women at that time. Well, within weeks of my coming in contact with folk music, I thought it was really great, dancing. Then as I've written, it was the first step out of the ghetto for me. You know, dancing with Italian girls, dancing with Toshi Seeger, you know, Japanese girl, I couldn't believe it. And within 2 months of the time I was going there, becoming a wheelwright in the group very quickly, forgetting about high school science, my career as a doctor, forgetting about astronomy club, all of that immediately. To the great consternation of my mother and father, I started listening to Josh White, to Woody Guthrie, Lead Belly, Richard Dyer Bennett. Now it's interesting because I only thought about it recently when I saw that Richard Dyer Bennett died, how conservative folk music is. And I have that problem with my own kid, who's 18. I heard Richard Dyer Bennett sing John Henry at a party. So to me, that was John Henry.
Sure.
And then when I heard Leadbelly sing John Henry, I don't remember whether it was a month later or 6 months later, it sounded strange to me. So in other words, the first version of the song you hear is the traditional one. Now my kid has been watching me do square dances now, you know, since she's born. She can sleep behind the microphone or no problems about the speaker. And then when I started coming back to America often, I would go to New Jersey or Connecticut and pick up 1 or 2 new dances each time to fit with my idea of what dancing is. Then Philomena said, I don't like those new dances. Can't you just do the old dances? You know, so she already, traditional American square dance, those 20, 30 dances she saw me do. So I met these people on a first name basis in a very natural way. We had a program on WNYC, that's the city station in New York, right after Leadbelly, so I saw him every week for 7 months at a time. In Margot's group, it was the beginning of a changeover. In Margot's group, we danced the whole night. In those days, you danced 3 square dances and 2 folk dances, round dances, and 3 squares and 2 round dances. And then at the end of the evening, we sang songs together, mostly in choruses, and probably a repertory of 50 songs or 75 songs. And at that time, there were a half a dozen people that could play the banjo in New York City at all. I mean, Joe Jaffe, Woody Wachtel, Stewie Jameson, Pete Seeger. I mean, and then people that played the guitar like Tom Paley, but there's hardly anybody we knew that played the fiddle. When we played square dances, it was either recordings or piano.
Okay. What period now, so I can orient myself?
It's 45.
Okay,
45
just at the end of the war.
Just the end of the war.
Okay.
It may be 44, but it's around
Right.
that period.
Okay.
44, 45. And I'm sold on it. At Margot's group, the American Square Dance group, I understand now it was a communist front of some kind, because otherwise they wouldn't have the name American in it, which was very popular at that time. You know, songs of America, songs of the people, American songs of American people, people songs of American folks. Or they would have all these combinations. And I'm taking a little time because I'm thinking about it. In this group, we did quadrilles, which came from New York City, from the upper classes when they had, you know, and we would learn about the Dodworth family. We'd go to his house on 26th Street or something like that. Then Roosevelt, we'd go to his house, but there were some dances over there. And they were going to some round dances that were brought to Colorado when they were making money down there in the 1840s. So they brought dance teachers from Paris. Then we did dances from square dances upstate New York. We did some of the commercial square dances based on the known folk music melodies at the time, visiting couple dances. We did long way sets, which they only call contras now. So we did a huge variety of dances. But then in the evening, we did this very small variety of folk songs, Michael Roll the Boat Ashore, and things like that. And we also sang part singing, shape note hymns. And I wrote a study in the Beggar's Opera for the group, which really turned me on because it used old English dance melodies. Well, what I want to say is that through Margot, I developed a sense for everything happening in folk music. At the same time that she was doing this, there was all the real communist stuff going on, which I somehow avoided knowing about. Now, I come from a lower middle class, lower working class family, and why I was against unions and stuff like that. So I still remember going to the first hootenanny that I went to, and Pete Seeger was singing, "Oh, you can't scare me, I'm sticking to the union, I'm sticking to the union," and he still remembers that even. And I scream out, "Oh, you can't force me to join the union, to join the union, to join the union, oh, you can't force me to join the union," and the NAM is enough for me, or something like that. And I think now, how the hell could I have said something about the NAM, you know, coming from the Bronx, which I went to visit last week, which is just open air jungle now. Well, anyway, I went there, and I never stopped going there either.
These would be weekly meetings with the Margaret
I
Mayors
don't think
group.
The Margot Mayors group, I was like
A regular.
inside member.
Yeah.
Someone told me even 10 years ago that, look, Izzy, you were with the in-group because you were with the 10 people who went to a bar afterwards. We others didn't go. Yes, but I didn't drink, but I would just have chocolate pudding and milk, but everyone else was drinking beer.
And were the hoots people's songs hoots?
People's songs.
Okay.
They also had something called American Folk Say, which I also religiously avoided, somehow. I also avoided all things with Will Gear and all those things. And
Yeah.
because these things passed me by, and I religiously went to everything that was with folk. I went to the international folk dance groups. When Israeli dancing became popular, I was with them. Then it was Folk Dance House on 6th Avenue in the Village, which I used to go to fairly religiously, not so much the folk dance, international folk dance groups. That means I kept up with everything except the Communist Party, left wing, and the schisms of folk music. To this day, I cannot understand how I avoided missing that. So that I read now that in 1948 People's Songs was banned at Brooklyn College. And I said, how could I have missed knowing that? Because I went to Brooklyn College, and I was in the first course given at Brooklyn College in 1945 with Freddie Hellerman. And Maynard Solomon was at the school at the time. So everyone is very knowledgeable about the left except I. Now, Leadbelly dies. I went to the last concert he put on in New York, on 229 West 43rd Street, New York Times, that little music hall then. And he dies. And then there's a memorial concert for him, Carnegie at Town Hall, with Oscar Brand, Tom Paley, Woody Guthrie was there too. Alan Lomax running it. A lot of people there.
We're at 49, I believe. Leadbelly died.
He died in 49.
Yeah.
And the concert was either late 49 or I think it was spring of 50.
Okay.
I'm at this concert. I think it's a great concert. And then I read Dick Royce's book. And he says, because of schisms in the Communist Party, certain performers didn't appear. So I said, where was I at the time? You know, smart young intellectual, that means real lives didn't appear, because others wouldn't have appeared. Then in, I don't remember the year now, but that's in the Royce's book, they had a concert for Woody Guthrie when he was still alive, sitting on the second floor of this labor unit hall on 17th Street. I don't know, do you know?
I want to think of 57 or so. Is it that
It's
way?
something like that.
Yeah, that's what I think. I have a vision of the picture. He's sitting next to Harold.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, he looked deathly. I can still see him there. And I read the text with Dick Royce, and Dick Royce states categorically that Pete Seeger, the tears are streaming down his face, and his hand lifted at, defiance against the capitalist system. And even though this was happening, we still go on. So I said, gee, I don't remember that. I was there. In other words, so I went there for the folk music.
Yeah.
Like Alexander Pope wrote, many to church repair, not for the thought, but the music there. So I didn't go to these left-wing things for the thought. I went there for the music.
Did you have any politics through the 50s?
No. And it's amazing me to this day that every once in a while I meet somebody who's 46, 48, who knows a lot more about it than I do. So, for example, all the beautiful, smart girls at Brooklyn College, they all were members of American Youth for Democracy or Young Communist League, or things like that, which I had no comprehension of.
And you didn't go to the various summer camps?
I never went to Woodland or the, I know the names, but I can't think of them. They had acronyms for the different names.
Wachiwa, Walker's Children's Camp.
Wachika.
Wachika, yeah, that's it, yeah.
So people that are 45 and 50 years old, they will say, they will say, that's to say, people 15 to 20 years younger than me know about Henry A. Wallace, which I don't know about. That means their parents were members of the Communist Party or the Progressive Party. So that means, basically, if not for the Communist Party, I never would have found out about folk music in America. Okay, that's...
But you yourself weren't touched by it except by the music.
Well, I bought the songs of the Spanish Civil War, and it's almost like masturbating behind the house, like doing something secret and dirty. But I listened to them; they're very good songs. And I bought all the records of Alan Lomax. Well, I only found out later. I was living in his apartment, and I only found out later that I made a party for him when he came back from England in '58 in my store on McDougal Street, just around the corner from where he lived, because I was living in his apartment. And how the hell could I not figure out at that time that he was cooling off for 10 years in England because of the communist scare, or the folk music scare, or the word you use it, or whatever. So I'm constantly finding out that I didn't know the political things behind the stuff that I was listening to and liking. Now, Margot Mayo never mentioned a word about the Communist Party, but her group was dancing at all these things that Woody Guthrie and Pete Seeger and everybody else was at. So I was also always interested in jazz. Actually, I'm still interested in jazz more than folk music. I like the 50s and 60s stuff. I always hung around bookshops as a kid from the age of 12. I was a mascot of what they called Book Row, the bookstores. When I walked in as a 12, 13, 14-year-old, the people would leave 200,000 books in the store, go out for lunch, and I would get paid a book or something like that. So the type of my work became very clear at a very early age, that I don't like working for money. I like to do things. And then if I get presents like 50 CDs from Columbia, that's nice. Actually, when I went to Columbia this week, I felt it was a hard day's work. I worked hard for $700, $800 worth of records. I stood there 2.5 hours watching these people run in and out like a beehive, all scared for their jobs, all trying to get something that's going to sell, which I missed. What you told me now that Pete was involved in. So, and I hung around the bookshops, and I never graduated college. And I've never said this in print, on tape. I worked 14 summers in the wash circuit as a waiter. I can't explain those 14 years. It's like, I cannot explain what happened to me between the ages of 16 and 29 in any logical way, which I can't just let everything else
What did you do to earn a living through your 20s? Because you didn't start Folklore Center until 57. Yeah.
Well, as I said, I can't explain that.
Okay.
And because I read that so-and-so was traveling here, Woody Wachtel went down to the mountains, PC was all around the country, Woody Wachtel was all around the country, and Stewie Jameson made a trip down to Kentucky, and somehow I was so unsure of myself, I never left New York City, basically. But my motto even then was I like folk music. So hanging around the bookstores, I decided the only way I could make a living was put out a catalog of books on folk music. The first catalog of folk music I put out was in 1955, I think. 54, 55. And the person that started that was Kenny Goldstein. And I met Kenny Goldstein. I forgot now whether through Dave Garr or the other way around, but somebody introduced me to him. And I came to his house in the Bronx just the day that his first daughter was being born. So there was a sign on the door that so I used to go to Kenny, and they recorded the Clancy brothers in his apartment in the Bronx. They recorded Reverend Gary Davis. And I'll tell you, all the other fancy stuff later on isn't any better than when he recorded in his apartment. And his view of editing at the time was just a razor blade. Then, well, that's a whole separate story, which you should get, because he feels neglected and forgotten, because he put out about 600 records. And he was the one that decided which companies put out which musicians at which time. He worked for about 6 or 8 different companies. Like that's long before Sam Charters did that kind of thing. And so I went through his library, and my first catalog, which was issues from my friend's bookshop, sent to Broadway. He had moved, which is now a condominium. I see these things and I walk around. When he was there, it was like $50 a month. Now each floor is $1 million, and you have these dead Puerto Rican people laying on the street in front of the place. So it's a disgusting scene. I put out a catalog, and I am so goddamn proud of that catalog now. But somebody stole it or borrowed it, but I put out a second catalog in 1957. Just before I opened my store, I announced that my store is going to open in 2 months on McDougal Street. Now, those 2 catalogs are fantastic, outstanding documents of my own mindset, because it wasn't pure folklore. Now, those 2 catalogs are fantastic documents, partially my mindset, and partially my picture of what folk music should be, and what folk music is. You can
Just
answer
keep
it.
going. I'm not gonna
It's
answer.
better to answer it.
Well, again, I think it's, let me see. Yeah, see, Dorita's a separate line for her work.
Oh, okay.
And I just let her machine get that.
Because I'll send you a Xerox copy when I come back.
Okay.
It's the first time that there's so many areas of music involved in a catalog. In other words, I have folk dance in there, I have international folk dance in there, I have European folk dance books in there, I have folklore books in there, English and Scottish popular ballads, 20 books, Irish songs, broadsides. And I went up to Irwin Silber, whose office was at 11th Street at that time. It was the office half as big as the kitchen. And I said, "You motherfucker, you communist son of a bitch bastard, I disagree with you completely on your ideas of folk music," which I'll come back to now,
Yeah.
what folk music is. "But I want to put it in your 2 books in my serious folklore catalog," which was the People's Song Book,
Okay.
and what was the other? Lift Every Voice.
Okay.
So he left. Now that becomes historical also.
And he knew you then, correct? From your music
He didn't know me so well, but
Okay.
he may have known who I
You were
was.
hanging around.
But I knew who he was because he used to run, he would do the square dancing at the Hootenannies.
Right.
Now, the difference between Margot's group and the folksay groups were that they would have singing primarily, people playing guitars, whereas our singing was mostly group singing, and people singing topical songs, sometimes their own songs, not like singer-songwriters of a later period. And they were singing definitely political songs, not just topical songs, which I disliked. And then at the end they would have a square dance, where Irwin Silver would say, "Swing a Union Mate around," things like that, and I'd say, "Why do you have to call Union Mate boys? This is not the thing as swing you call a girl or something." But I enjoyed that, but I didn't go to the obviously political theater that Will Geer had with Woody Guthrie and other people. I cannot explain how it is that I never went to any of those evenings. But I went to the Hootenannies. So I never went a step above, say.
Sure.
In other words, going to a particular political grouping.
Right.
But all the girls I was with, they were all part of these different groupings. I opened my store in '57. 3 or 4 weeks before I opened it, you have it in the Lodge book, I wrote something called The Secret History of Folklore USA, which is actually going to be an impetus in Ron Cohen's book. Because I keep saying that I make time pegs of things. I categorize things. And people think I'm very partial or narrow, or whatever, but I say, instead of saying, now they call me cynical, bitter, old, and I say, instead of saying that I'm narrow, impartial, cynical, bitter, old, just say if I'm right or wrong. And I gain more friends that way now also. I have new ways to gain enemies all the time. So the point I'm making is if anyone disagrees with me, they never disagreed with me at the time, they don't disagree with me today. Well, I opened the store in 57. 3 weeks before I opened the store, I write something in a notebook, which I found by accident lying in the garbage on the floor after I moved from America. I lost a lot of papers, called A Secret History of Folklore USA, in which I opened my eyes for the first time. That this idealistic folk music melange that I was interested in was turning into pure commerce. Whether it was Ernie Lieberman who changed his name, whether it was Bob de Cormier arranging for this and that, Eric Darling doing this and that, and Louis was doing this and that. I opened my eyes, and the year 1957 was already too late for my idealism. Now, I don't understand how I could be blinded not to see this change happening under my eyes. So that means I somehow was nurtured by these left-wing ideals, which was not carried out by these left-wing ideals to turn to be commercial. You can see in the first sentence I wrote in that thing in 1959, the left will find out very quickly there's more money in copyright than in now if you look at the folk song books that came out, I don't remember the year, but it's very easy to find out. There were 6 or 7 collections, Norman Kasdan and Alan Lomax. There's some pop collections of folk music. Between 55 and 60, there were about 8 collections everyone had, completely rearranged text for copyright purposes. It's disgusting. I'm the only one that has ever written about that. So that means everyone that was a left-winger accepted the fact that they made a living out of this music now. Everyone changed, and then I'm called a bitter old person already when I'm 30 years old when I'm writing about it. And these motherfuckers, they still think they're superior to me because they were left-wingers in 1950 when I wasn't. So you see I have a little chip on my shoulder, as Happy Trout described as perhaps a tree. Well, I opened my store in 1957. When I look back at it now, I was totally nuts to open up a store on McDougal Street, which was the commercial street of the time. I was totally nuts to open up a store selling serious scholarship on sea shanties, selling books on the history of folklore, selling books on ballads, selling books on Spanish folk songs, selling books on Polish folk dance materials. I had a whole store filled with this stuff, Song of the Civil War. Who could possibly be interested in that?
Right.
And basically, nobody was interested in that. Well,
was your first vision of the Folklore Center a bookstore?
it was a bookshop and a record shop. I had no concept yet of publishing anyway, or doing radio programs, or putting on concerts in anyway.
Okay, nothing at all.
So I was a schnook, as they say. I was a schnook. I opened up the Folklore Center in the middle of Leftville, surrounded by the commies, you know, whether it's Earl Robinson or Bob de Cormier, all these people a block away. None of these people ever came into my store. So that means I was a foreign element in a left-wing situation. Okay, behold with me. I opened the store in 57. It immediately becomes the center of the universe for the folk music. Everyone knows about me. Everyone that was in that store, everyone came there. And I wasn't a particularly forceful personality. I wasn't a speaker or a writer or a declaimer. But I did become that very quickly. And very soon after I opened, I started putting on concerts in my store. And it's a very narrow store. It was about 5 feet wide and about 20 feet long. And concerts with Fred Gerlach and Dave Van Ronk, a group of skiffle singers from England. You name anyone at the period, I probably put them on a concert there. And I think it was 1959, Irwin Silver comes to me and he said, "Hey Izzy, maybe you should write something, he realized that, maybe you should write for Sing Out, because you're meeting everyone, you're talking to everyone, maybe you should do something." He said, "You motherfucker." I didn't say use that word at that time. He says, you commie, okay, I'll do it for you. Under one condition, that you never change a word of anything I write. He says, he just laughs, of course, you know. In other words, he knew what he was getting. What he was getting from me was exactly my folk music catalog of 3 years earlier.
Okay.
That everything should be under one roof. There should be technical stuff, pop stuff, shit stuff, local nut stuff, or everything. And I'm trying to do that in Sweden now. That you have to let live on every level. We are living in a commercial culture. And I wrote in my notebook recently that William Blake could do his engravings and etchings, but he was competing in a commercial culture. He decided to do it on his own. But he had support. You know, people came and bought his prints for 1 shilling or whatever. Whereas in Sweden, since they're drowning in Swedish culture, in American culture, they can't express their own culture the way William Blake did in his own country. So what I'm saying is, we're living in a commercial culture, and you can't say I can't tell someone not to be commercial. Now, I'm lucky that I wasn't a singer. If I was a singer, I would have had to kowtow to all the rules of the time. If I was a dancer, I would have had to kowtow to all the rules of the time. If I was a writer, I would have had to kowtow to all the... I'm saying this not for the first time like this. I would have had to kowtow. Whereas if I made a living out of any one element, sure, or if I goes into my work, I would have the same situation as everyone else. Now somehow I've skirted all the issues, all the problems, all the things, and I keep on going, writing my feelings. And so he comes to me and says, Izzy, write for us. If you look at the first issues, I'm a very nice guy. I'm just saying happenings, people coming and going. And very soon I toss off that and I say what I'm thinking about things. And people got angry with me all the time. I look back at it now, what I did actually was, we all live in a society with rules, social rules. So people talk together, people are dancers, or people are musicians, or people are diamond smiths, or whatever they are. You don't reveal what's happening inside to the people outside. So, for example, there will be a meeting about the war, say, later on. And I would write things about that in my column. Then the people that in the war, anti-war committee felt I was betraying them. I would write something, inside information, on Newport, then they will get angry at me. I say, wait a second. If you're saying one thing here, you should be saying the same thing outside. So somewhere I have this obsession for the truth, and I really wanted people to know what's happening. Now I started putting on concerts almost regularly now.
Let me orient ourselves in terms of
Okay.
time now. 57, you start
57, I'm starting.
58, you're starting the concerts that are
No, 57, almost
immediately.
The first concert I put on was Peggy Seeger.
Okay.
Al Grossman calls me up to Chicago. Izzy, Peggy Seeger's coming to New York, and he put on a concert for her.
Okay.
So that guy was smart. I said, let me put on Smoke. So he was running the Gate of Horn then. And so he called me up, and that started my career. And then I did a concert with Mike Seeger, then I put on the first concert with New York City Ramblers in 58, before that had a name, and then we started the Friends of Old Time Music around 61, and put on everyone you could possibly think of.
Let me ask you a question here before we move along. I want to get a sense, this is one of the things I wrote to you about, in the late 50s, other than these organizations that were putting on concerts, hootenannies for themselves, and then you started putting on public performances.
Oh, but there were
in
other people
57.
putting on, there were other things.
Were there other public concerts going on in the folk music field in New York?
Yeah, let me come to that another time.
Okay.
Okay. There were a lot of other things,
Okay.
but I can't think of the names now.
Okay.
I mean, there's this guy had it with this theater in the village. There were a number of things going on. A little bit more commercial than my series,
I knew what you were doing.
but there were other things going on. I'd rather think about that and present like 3 or 4 things together.
Okay.
So I'm immersed myself at the moment.
Okay.
So I put on, I don't know, between 500 and 1,000 concerts in 15, 16 years. I'm the only one in America that put on so many concerts without a single contract. And my basic rule was that if someone was like you or me, they got half the gate. And if they were traditional singers, say someone Elizabeth Cotton or something, they got a guarantee, which meant they usually lost money on traditional singers, and then the singer like us, that's the way it was. And I got this tremendous reputation. And I really felt myself growing and pushing it. And people would really like to get this inside stuff from me. So like I would find out that Harold Leventhal copyrighted the national anthem of India when he was a soldier in India. So I invited him to sing out. So he was very angry. I said, well, you did copyright the national anthem. Oh, I did to protect the singer. Well, so he wrote an article, you send it to me and I'll put it in my newsletter. I'll put it in the article that Harold Leventhal was defending the music of the peoples of India by copyrighting New York City, et cetera, et cetera. So I would do this all along. And some people threatened to sue me, but no one ever did, because basically there was nothing to sue. And they understood that from my viewpoint, I would write 3 or 4 sentences on things. I could say much more if I was sued for it. So like, for example, 1968, when Janis Joplin died, I wrote that Al Grossman is a co-conspirator of the self-murder of Janis Joplin. Sappy Dram comes down a few days later and says, Izzy, Al Grossman feels bad about you. I says, well, tell him to feel bad, tell him to sue me. Tell me what's right. Then I was in the Village last year and I found a book called Rock Music is Here to Pay, or something like that. The history of pop music. Page 232, there's an article. Al Grossman turned the pages and it said that he had insured all his singers for $200,000 each. When Janis Joplin died, the insurance company didn't want to pay off. So he had a lawyer and they negotiated back and forth. Guess how much money he got out of this insurance company? Your lawyer.
$200,000?
$112,000. $112,500. So that means it was a little bit more than half that she didn't kill herself. And just, you understand? So the thing that strikes me is that when I said that at the time, I know now I was totally correct. I have corroboration from a printed source. But everyone at the time, the folk music people, don't want to know about this. Now that's another area I'd like to take up separately. Ideas, left, and the singer. I'll bring up another case in point to illustrate this. Then we can come back to it. You think of a good heading. In 1972, just before I leave for America, for Sweden, there's a big concert at the Lincoln Center. And I'm asked to be the MC because I get $85 and I needed the money to go to Sweden. And I MC practically every concert in New York City because I really wasn't interested in myself. I just wanted to be part of things. And I would always let the audience know a little bit what was going on behind the stage. And I actually worked as some kind of magical, I was the only person in New York City that knew everyone in the audience, knew everyone on stage, knew all the managers and agents, knew all the people going on. The reason now I understand I could do that because I had no ownership in anything. So I would go to Newport, I could be with all the managers and all the agents and all the singers, and I could be with the public. But the minute, I keep repeating now, if I actually try to make money out of one area, that would be in the same position as everybody else. I haven't paid taxes in 64 years. Well, in 1972, I'm asked to MC a concert with Phil Oakes, Doc Watson. I don't remember who the third person was because the third person wasn't involved in what happened, which is unfair. I think it was a woman singer. My memory's usually good. And Bob Dylan comes to the concert, and there's a big fight raging backstage as to who should end the show. So I said, look, to me it doesn't make a difference if I'll talk about folk music up to the city to the country, or if it ends up with Doc Watson, I'll have music going from the country to the city. I'll try, even though I won't put on a concert in that way. So the manager of Phil Oakes won, because Phil Oakes was getting $4,000, and Doc Watson was only getting $2,500. Now, I remember when Doc Watson came with his whole family, and they got $150, and he thanked me, and then we did an extra workshop with Gabe Carlton and people like that. Some Folkways record. In New York University, got $10 each, and they thanked me. And 2 weeks later, he said, "Gee, I'm not going to go to Buffalo. I'm only paying $350." And to me, $350 I get paid for something is still good money. Well, anyway, I go on the stage. I really don't remember what I said about Doc Watson. And when it comes to Phil Oakes, I say, and now, ladies and gentlemen, our next singer has problems. Our next singer hasn't written a song in 5 years. He's changed the word from Johnson to Nixon, but he's been with the Tupamaros, he's been in Africa, he's been here and there, he's supposedly been slashed by the CIA. He's supposed to learn from all these things and write new songs. And now, Phil Oakes, or whatever like that. So Phil Oakes comes on the stage and he says, I didn't hear everything that Izzy said, because he's a swinging door there. But I don't think I like what he said, and I resented he said I should write new, et cetera, et cetera. That evening, I'm with the liberals in folk music. That is not the commies I started out with. And they hit me in some restaurant on Broadway. Joe Glazer was there, that does all the labor songs. And this woman from New Jersey, I won't say her name because it's not so important. She became a manager of both singers also. And these people say that I was not supporting Phil Oakes. And I said, you people are killing Phil Oakes. I'm fighting with them to do something. Now, when you read those articles that were suppressed and letters, I'm talking about suppression. Well, I think the Village Voice wrote a long article about this. I'm not sure if I have that in my scrapbooks. And they brought out the problem, but they didn't answer it. So that was always my situation, that I think in a way, if you start political, you should always be political. If you have a message, you should continue to have messages. And Phil Oakes actually killed himself because he wasn't as big as Bob Dylan. So, he would come to my store all the time and say, Izzy, my song is number 23 in Atlanta, Georgia. I'd say, well, that means there's 22 songs that are better than yours. You understand? He would always do things like that. There's an interview with him where he says he should defend Kennedy because he'd flown down to Washington with Kennedy, and I said, no. If you're against the war, you should work with people like Bruning and Morse, the only 2 senators that were against the war. He said, no, they don't have any popular base. You can't get anywhere. So I had the same argument with Thule Kupferberg and S. Sanders, and just about everybody that I found became a pattern. Every person that was talking in terms of political change, in terms of waving banners, as soon as they had a chance to become commercial, they did it. Not in the second chance or the third chance or the fourth chance. Whether it was so Thule Kupferberg and S. Sanders at the Fugs, they got $35,000 from the Verve, and I have that written down. And they said, well, the musicians aren't really part of the act. Ed and Thule don't know the first thing about music. And it was the same thing with everyone up and down the road. With Happy Traum telling me he's not a folk singer anymore, and then Mark Silver, my partner, becoming a rock and roller. And
Happy Traum saying that when? Date yourself.
You have the article in it, 1967.
Okay.
We're not folk singers anymore now. We're rock and rollers now. You got to understand that. So I said, all right. And he looked very unhappy in his big tie and a funny suit. And I'm right, they didn't have any money at the time. I don't blame them. See, again, I avoided that. So I would write all these things, knocking all the commercial stuff at the time, and getting away with it. And I've gotten lost. Stop for a second. So I found myself in a position very rapidly after opening the store in March or April 1957. I put on about a dozen concerts that year. 2 years later, we started the Friends of All Time Music, which meant that we got a little money from the Newport Folk Festival, maybe other sources. We had a few hundred members.
And what specifically was that?
That was John Cohen, Ralph Friends, and Izzy Young.
Okay.
John Cohen was the
I know who he is.
who he is, and Ralph Izzy,
I know
who
who
he
Ralph is.
And I was the schmuck that was doing the dirty work in the store, that they would come in and tell me how to do things. And
Was it just a concert promotion group, or what
well,
was
it didn't
the purpose of
exist, the group,
Okay.
actually.
Okay.
I mean, it would exist the way we are now.
It had a name. It was three people who gave themselves a name.
Well, at the Folklore Center, and
Okay.
they would do most of the deciding as to who played.
But under that name, you would put on concerts. Is that
Right, you know,
that's
so
what it
John
is?
Joseph Spence, maybe,
Okay.
New York,
Okay.
Mississippi John Hurt, and everybody else. Then, of course, John's favorites, then there were Ralph Ben's favorites. And then I could fight sometimes with the things I liked. But, so I was the least institutional part of that. And none of us made any money out of it. They had other things to do to make money out of it except me. So, as I said, the important thing I did at that point was to become the independent, moving cog between the public, the singers, musicians, the writers, and everything. Then later on, in '63, I started doing spot programs for Pacific and WBAI. Then in '67, I had a regular program every 2 weeks, Saturday afternoon, 2 to 4, which had 300,000 to 400,000 listeners. It was the most listened to program in New York at the time. There were plenty of other programs, but everyone listened to my program because it was mostly live. It was 2 hours. And you never knew what would be on the program. No one ever knew what it would say. But I was getting, almost in the beginning, which I have the proof of here, I was dissatisfied with Sing Out. Now, in 1958, I put out a jazz magazine called The Jazz Review with Nat Hentoff and Martin Williams, who just died recently of cancer. It's the best jazz magazine that ever came out. And I went bankrupt. That was the first time I went bankrupt. And they forced me out. And it went a short while later. But that was like the first magazine to write about John Coltrane. But we would also have articles like Big Bill Brunsey. It was probably the last time in American jazz music history that you could write about jazz and blues and folk music and things like that. Because then it became very split. So at that time when I opened, there was a hope feeling that not only I shared, that you could do a lot of things. So this jazz review was to 90% written by musicians, something I hadn't heard of before or since. And now people in Sweden find out I published the Jazz Review. They think it's wild. Then in '59, I got this urge to put out this magazine, which you have here, which you should really copy. And Ron found out all the old copies for me, so it's the first time I've seen them in 59, 69, 30 years, literally. Called Folk Music Guide USA. I thought that it would be interesting that people should know who was appearing where and what, which is exactly what I'm still doing in Sweden. But in some areas it's called networking in America. With this broad view, you'll flip when you see the list of singers. Now, that existed 4 issues. It was 10 issues for $1, obviously uneconomic. Now, 4 issues came out, November, December, January, February, '59 and '60. When you look at the list of names that are included, where they played, it's the first attempt at listing everything happening in the United States, outside of the sing-out thing, just the hootenannies or these small swapping song fairs. That's the name I was thinking of. I went to every one of those concerts. But we won't talk about that now.
Okay.
What was I just saying?
You were talking about the first attempt to list everything that was happening in the U.S.
Everything was happening in the United States and Canada. When I look at the list now, 30 years later, the list consists of totally perhaps 150, maybe 200 individuals, groups, of which 10 are black, and those black groups have played just like Josh White for Brother John Sellers, just for white audiences. So look at that now, it's very, but I have Richard Dye Bennett, and no one else would have had that, or Pete Seeger, or the Tarriers, or the Weavers. I have everything that's my dream of what folk music should be: commercial, pure, traditionalist, or whatever you want to call it, half commercial, because you can't have just pure in our culture. So you'll see it, you'll be very impressed. Now, if that, God, when was the, Dave God's The Kingston Trio, I think, is in there too.
Yeah, 59 I think
Yeah.
was their big hit.
But I think it's before Tom Dooley.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's mentioned in there. I forgot when it came out. But the point I'm making is that if that magazine had existed a year, 1 year more, I would have had to become a commercial success. I mean, I would have had to have 2 people working for me. Because then there would be 300 groups to write about: the Chad Mitchell Trio and the Mitchell Trio 4 and the Mitchell Trio 5, or all the billions of groups that came out, quartets and trios and quintets and stuff like that. So I actually physically couldn't have carried it, but that is an indicator, what I call a time peg. So that means I was always interested in feeling out what's going on and also wanting to be part of things. Maybe let's stop for a second now.
Sure.
Wait, just one.
Okay, I'm going to read Izzy a brief passage from Bob Spitz's biography of Dylan. I've been watching too many Olympics. Bob Spitz's biography of Dylan as a vantage point for a discussion of the village and folk music in the 50s.
I haven't read the book.
Understand.
I only looked up the thing on me, and I started to read the first 5 pages, and I found it incomprehensible.
He says, although the village had a long tradition of folk music, it provided a curious showcase for Bob Dylan. Throughout the late 1940s and even into the late 1950s, the village had nurtured a mainstream folk music that was for the most part international in flavor. He goes on to mention the people singing might be African tribal chants, English broadsides, Russian boat songs, Negro spirituals, flamenco flourishes, occasionally a cabaret-style singer like Theo Bickel, Cynthia Gooding, or Martha Schlamme presented an evening of folk songs at one of the village's intimate theaters. But aside from the Feeble Folk Singers Guild, which held bi-monthly Sunday night concerts, Greenwich Village was a wilderness to a kid in blue jeans and long curly hair with a fake Okie accent, whose ambition was to write and perform his own folk songs. I'm going to skip down a little bit. He refers to Oscar Brand, Ed McCurdy, Logan English, Gene Ritchie. These are but a handful of the well-respected journeymen who perpetuated folk music in Greenwich Village as one of the most academic, humorless, leaden, boring forms of entertainment to straddle the Eisenhower era. Is that your impression of folk music in the village in the 50s?
Well, he's not a good writer. It's not an apt description of the folk music scene. I'll deal with that thoroughly another time.
Okay.
I mean, that area, the different clubs
Okay.
and the different folk music societies, because I just started with myself.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of societies to talk about, and
Okay.
I'll write that down.
Okay.
But his description is not spurious. It's very, it's light. It's on the top. It's not.
Okay.
It's superficial, and the conclusion that it was leaden was wrong. It was exciting at the time,
Okay. If you want to deal.
and it was a big active public for it.
Okay, that's one of the things. You want to deal with that when we have more time?
I'd rather deal with that separately, because
Okay.
today, the first hour, I'm really talking about myself. It's not that I'm leaving out the other things.
Let me talk about focusing again on yourself. There was one point at which you approached Mike Porco and asked to do.
Oh, you have the documentation on that.
Okay,
there.
that's in there. Okay.
I have.
Okay.
Oh, there's something else. I don't think I brought it with me. Wait, turn off the machine.
Okay, continuing with Izzy Young, I'm going to talk a little bit about some people. I want to put some names out and talk about their role in what is broadly called the folk music revival, their importance or lack of it, or whatever impressions Izzy might have.
Okay.
Peter Yarrow.
I never knew Peter so well. I knew Al Grossman well, and I knew Mary. She would come to the store, and Noel Stuckey. He actually gave me $1,000 when I needed to move to Europe. I had $4,000 saved when I went to Europe. That was no stooky. Peter Yarrow, I always thought was very tight, and I never felt close to him. To me, he was some kind of a phony liberal. And I was at a recording session with them once when they recorded some song, and they were doing tape number 167, put that together with tape 59, and do that with this and that. And Noel said something nice to me, and Peter said, Izzy, you were the first one that had our first record in the, in your window. You're the only one in the United States that had it. But I bet you don't have number 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 in the window. So that's right. That's right. So I never met him very much, so I don't have much to say about him.
Mary Travers, you knew, she grew up in New York.
Yeah.
And used to sing in one. Did you get
Little
to know
Red
her
Schoolhouse.
well?
Yeah.
Mary Travers. Were you surprised when she became?
No, she was. I never felt that she changed in any way. In other words, I was never close to Peter Yarrow. Mary Travers would come into the store long before she was well known, and came into the store long after she was well known. And I feel that if I met her today, I think we would have no problem talking to each other. But she was known as a nice, soft woman, and some folk singers made it with her, which I didn't, including one folk singer made it in my apartment. Don't print that. But, so she was very friendly.
Was she very political?
I never heard of that.
So even.
Has anyone else heard of that?
Only that she was a red diaper baby and her family was a political family.
Because she went to Little Red Schoolhouse right around the corner of Bleecker Street, with Bob de Cormier and all those people. But I never remember her being political. And that article I wrote on Bob Dylan 1965 was also really aimed at Peter, Paul, and Mary. Because in 1965, I was one of the group of people that arranged the first concert against the war at Carnegie Hall. And Theo Bickel was MC for one part, and I was MC for the other part, and Phil Oakes was there, and everybody was there. Pete Seeger, naturally. Everybody was there except Bob Dylan, except Peter, Paul, and Mary. And the reason given at the time was, well, you have to understand, I don't know if it was Al Grossman, one of his flunkies. What you have to understand is the civil rights impulse is more important than the anti-war impulse now. So I get the picture. In other words, all these people, Judy Collins, Phil Oakes, Bob Dylan, would go down to Mississippi for a day, raise a storm, and disappear when the stuff was happening. And that was the way they saw getting publicity at that time. I'm not saying they were dishonest, but that was the way you got publicity at the time. However, in 1965, when I'm emceeing the concert, now I don't remember if I was the first one or the second one. Theo Bickel did half and I did half. Of course, I didn't think I was big enough to do the whole show. I resented Theo Bickel. I thought I was bigger than him. But I wrote that article on Bob Dylan, which you have Bob Dylan taunt. And I didn't come to understand it completely until 1968, when Peter, Paul, and Mary flew down to Washington. As soon as they heard there was 500,000 people demonstrating, including Izzy Young and all the folk mix. And when it became popular enough, then they were willing. The main picture that people remember of is her hair flowing in the wind at this memorial, the Jefferson Memorial.
I know the picture.
You know the picture.
Yeah.
So that's the picture everyone has of the anti-war movement. However, when I was doing it, and Pete Seeger was doing it, Errol Silver was doing it, and Mo Ash and everybody else was doing it, then Al Grossman said no. And Bob Dylan said no, and therefore Peter, Paul, and Mary said no. And then when it comes down to the crunch, Peter, Paul, and Mary have the gall to say they think they could have turned the country around, they could have changed the country around, they could have gotten the president to be elected where they wanted to, but they decided not to. And I don't buy that.
You're talking about somebody who always was strong in his political outputs. Talk a little bit about your association with Phil Oakes in his earlier days in the Village, when he got there in '63.
Well, I have that written down.
Okay.
Phil Oakes was always a problem case for me. Because he came into the store, I met him before I met Bob Dylan, and he was already getting a name for himself. And he's one of the few people, in fact, I put on most of the traditional singers, or city singers, but I didn't put on so many of the singer-songwriters, even in the beginning. So in other words, I wasn't big enough for Phil Oakes to put on in a concert. Well, he was already making it somebody, getting audience of 200, 300, 500 at the time. So he would come to the store all the time. He was never interested in anything I was putting on myself. And Bob Dylan never came to any of my concerts either. You'll see the list of people who come to the concerts. You can recognize, you'll see there's a pattern, who comes and who doesn't come, which I'm always aware of, including in Sweden. He would come, we would always have a good talk for an hour or a half hour, and he was explaining where I was, the liberal that's fucking up everything, and he's the revolutionary that's, I didn't hear from him the first time. If you're not a part of the solution, you're part of the problem, that kind of thing. But that's the way he would treat me, as if I was a young kid and he was giving me the truth. But I didn't know anything about the history of his life as a journalism student. No one knew about it at the time. I only found it out when the book was written about it later. About his college life, his early journalism attempts, I know nothing of. But he would come to the store, and he would always want to know who was giving poetry readings. And I would always tell him, but he would never come. So one of the times I have it written down, and he says to me, well, I think it's wrong, Phil, for you not to come to my poetry readings. So I said, he said, well, I don't want to come to a poetry reading unless I know it's as important as William Butler Yeats or something like that. So I said, you're full of shit. You got to take chances. You can't. There's no guarantees in life. And I said, what do you plan to do? I'm joining. I forgot. I have the words there. The pantheon of art. With who? Leonardo da Vinci and somebody else. So I said, you're full of shit. And that's why he used to like me, because I would tell him these things. Then whenever 2 or 3 times we went out to the airport together, he would pay for the taxi, I'd take a subway back. So he would always try to impress me. But I don't think he was ever on my radio program, on BAI. So he had it was sad, because when he killed himself, my mother called me up in Stockholm. Izzy, you remember that guy, Phil Oakes, whatever his name was, the guy who used to pee on your floor? That's how my mother remembers him. He used to be in the store all the time with a pill and piss. But he wouldn't really tell me or anyone else about the new songs he was writing. The new songs he was writing, he usually found out, through Broadside magazine, which we should talk about also, all the time. Or at some of the benefit concerts that he appeared at. But I can't say we were really close. There was something antagonistic between us. Like, he would always have to come to me to prove that he was on top of her. Like I told you, I'm number 23 in Atlanta, Georgia. I said, well, there's 22 better songs. So.
It said that he was very, very ambitious. Is that a sense that you got really wanted to make it?
Oh, he really wanted to make it, okay.